It was the early evening and I walked home from work, kindergarten teacher, as I usually did. I cut through the large cemetery where most of my family was buried, and I decided to go pay my respects as I did from time to time. An odd fog began to roll in as the sun set, but I took no heed of it. I instead looked for the specific oak tree where my family plot was. The fog was growing thicker, so I decided to head home and come by tomorrow. I began running into a problem. I didn't know where I was in the fog. Graves would only appear in front of me just short of me running into them. I became startled as a statue of an angel appeared in front of me. The angel stared upwards with its arms raised as if to take a soul to heaven. I didn't recognize the grave, so I looked to see whose it was. The name and date appeared to be scratched out by a chisel or something similar, but I could still make out the beginning of the Lord's Prayer. As I read it, I heard what sounded like a child whispering the prayer. I looked around, but couldn't see very far. I looked back at the statue, and the angel was staring down at me with a glare. I was startled, but I then just brushed it off as a lapse in memory. I continued through the cemetery, growing increasingly worried and out of touch with time. A large shadow appeared in front of me. I approached it slowly. It was a tree, but not the one I sought earlier. Its branches began shaking as if something were moving within the leaves. I couldn't make anything out, and assumed it was a squirrel or cat, but then, out of the quiet fog, I once more heard the sound of a child saying the Lord's Prayer. I called out, but there was no response. I waited for a moment, then the voices of more children began saying the Lord's Prayer. I screamed for someone to help, but I only heard the children as I began to see shapes move in the fog. It felt as 1,000 eyes were upon me as more and more children joined in the chant. None seen, all heard. Then all at once the voices stopped. The fog felt hollow and empty. The brief silence was shattered by a deep demonic voice repeating the verse in a sinister and mocking tone. I ran like I had never ran before. The air quickly grew bitter and cold. The demonic one began shouting in Latin. I kept looking back over my shoulder, but all I could see were the shifting shapes of the fog. How long had I been running? The cemetery was big, but nowhere near this distance. I fell to my knees and began to sob in terror. What was going on? Shadows took form within the fog and began approaching me. Terror washed over me as I tried to muster breath for a scream, but I was too winded from the run. Shadowy arms shot out from the mist and grabbed hold of my arms. I struggled as they pulled my sleeves back. They began to carve Latin inscriptions into my flesh. I screamed in agony. I looked at the bleeding words as they began to ignite within my flesh. My arms went up in a flash of white fire. I was numb to everything as I looked at the words written in the smoldering skin. It was in English now. Words such as die, gone, sorry, abandoned, and eternal appeared in crimson against the blackened flesh. I ripped from their hold and took off faster than before, the demons laughing all the while. I sprinted for a moment and looked over my shoulder, and then forward again just in time to hit a tree. I woke up as the sun rose. Under the tree I searched for the other evening. I looked at my arms, they were normal. I looked toward my family plot to see a little boy setting a flower down as his parents watched. I walked over to ask who they knew, but as I got close I noticed it was my name on the grave. The date said I died over 2 years ago. My heart sank as the memories flooded back, and watched as one of my former students placed a flower at his teacher's grave. Am I in hell? I write this as an apology to those who are affected by my mistakes. I hope that you can find it in your hearts to forgive me, though I will understand if you can't. My wife was terminally ill and, a few months ago, she died. I was very sad at the loss as she was a marvelous, caring woman. She was kind, and everyone that met her said their lives were better for it. I couldn't bear the pain though, so I did something terrible. I will not tell you how I did it or how I learned to, for enough damage has been done, but I found a way to bring her back. To raise her from the dead. I could no longer bear to be alone, and I made a terrible mistake in my loneliness. When I finished the ritual, nothing happened. Not at first anyway. I was about to rebury her when I first started to hear breathing. With an understandable measure of joy, I realized that the sound was emanating from her mouth. I had done it. At the time I could not fully understand what it was, but, in my blissful ignorance, I carried her home. She was not the same. She was no longer caring, but a primal, instinctive beast. She howled and screamed, snarled at me whenever I passed. I was worried, not for my own sake but for hers. She could escape. She could go out and do something to get hurt. Let the record show that it was for her own good that I locked her in my basement. I never meant to keep her that way. I never knew that my actions would set a chain reaction of unfathomable horrors into action. I kept her there for as long as I could, but her screams grew more and more desperate. I was chilled to my very core by the screams of my betrothed, and before long I stood on the rain-slick precipice of insanity. I needed to do something. As it so happened, I was not the only one to hear the screams. My neighbors began to show interest, eventually sneaking onto my estate to snoop around. I caught them in the act, and as I had no explanation for what they may have seen, I attacked them. I didn't kill them, but they were unable to leave of their own accord and, as I feared the consequences of letting them go, I locked them in the basement with my wife. This was my second mistake. The first, of course, being that I raised her in the first place. That night I knew the sound of crunching bone. Upon my awakening in the morning, I went down to check on the neighbors. One was gone, the other was wide-eyed, cowering in the corner and covered in blood. Something else was off too, though at first I did not know what. Then it hit me. The screams had subsided. My wife was asleep. She had fed, and now she slumbered. All this time, the screams were of hunger. I shut the door, and went to lie down. She lasted a few more days, obviously feasting on the other neighbor. It seemed that she only needed to eat once every few days. Now, I'm not proud of what I did next, but I didn't know what else to do. I went out at night every few days, around the time that only a few people would still be around. I stalked the streets and attacked people who walked alone. I would take them back to my wife and leave them in the basement. I would often wake from my slumber to hear their screams, cries for help. This would always rouse the beast and would never last longer than a minute or so. 10 minutes of crunching and gurgling pleas later the deed would be done and I could rest easy for another few days. Although I did not kill anyone, I may as well have. It was my actions that brought about the deaths of so many, and my actions that robbed so many of loved ones of closure. How many torn and bloodied rags did I have to burn? How many personal effects were destroyed by my hands? I lost track of the numbers, but surely even one is too high a number. I was kept awake by its screams, and it shall henceforth be referred to as it, for I have come to the conclusion that this monster is not my beloved, so I fed it. A night of rest for the lives of so many. Day by day it grew stronger, its strength either increasing or returning, for I know not what horrible beast is now in possession of my wife's body, and as time went on I was forced to bring home more food. Bigger people. Men. 2 women. A woman and a man. Eventually it was eating a full-grown man every day. I knew, in some dark corner of my mind I knew that this could not go on forever. I could not keep taking people. I was in danger of being caught, and, though I deserved to be, fear took hold of me and that, I suppose, is why I let that charade go on for as long as it did. So I decided to flee. I had just packed my bags when I heard a knock on my door. The police had found a trail of blood leading through the woods up to my estate and were inquiring as to whether I'd seen or heard anything suspicious. I managed to keep a cool head and talk my way out of what could have potentially been a very unpleasant situation. I know not why, only that I deserved it. It began to scream. It screamed louder than I had ever heard it scream before, and it sounded mad. The police instantly drew their guns and went in, thinking perhaps some horrific predatory beast had made its way into my home. They eventually found my basement door and threw it open. Slowly, ever so slowly, they descended the stairs. I was at a loss for what to do, so I did the only thing I could think of in the heat of the moment. I shut the door. Throwing the bolt across, I ran to my quarters and grabbed my bags, making for the door. The screams of the police haunt me to this very day. I heard the sound of splintering wood as that thing burst out of its cell. It was now loose in the house. I ran as fast as my legs could carry me out of there, out into the streets of the town I had stalked, into a train, and I left that place far behind. My old home is a ghost town now. Splashed with blood, yet the no bodies remain. How I long to return to my estate, to gather up all of my research and burn it so that this might never happen again. I have made many an attempt to do so, in fact, though every time I get near I hear that beast's wild howls, screaming for flesh. I know it haunts my home now. I know it wears my wife's skin, but the worst part of all this? I let it happen. Okay. Never green texted before, but I'll do my best. So, I'm from Texas originally, living in Maine now. Growing up, I used to hear ghost stories pretty much all the time. Everyone I knew had at least one, and it's no wonder. Texas is a treasure trove of haunted locales with cool backstories. Like the brother and sister who killed themselves out in Childress. People say that was no suicide, but a cult sacrifice. And the perpetrators have never been found. Or the janitor who worked at the Houston Public Library. He used to play the violin after his shifts out on the balcony. He is long since passed, but people still occasionally hear the mournful strains of his fiddle out there. Then there's Patterson Road. Now this one comes with a yarn spun by my 8th grade social studies teacher. He was as/X/ as they come, and occasionally he'd sprinkle weird bits of Texas folklore into his lectures, a real treat for me. So, one day, just before Halloween, he told the class, "You can put your books away. We're not having a lecture." He leaned back, resting on his desk, a smile on his face. "Today's a special day," he said. And thus, I was introduced to the lore surrounding Patterson Road, PIC-related. No one knows why it's haunted exactly. Some say that it was the site of a slaughter. A community of settlers brutally attacked and killed by Confederate soldiers. Others say opposing militias once squared off against each other at that spot. Heavy losses on both sides. Terrible bloodshed. Whatever the reason, everybody around there knows, you don't go to there after dark. Drivers who pause along Patterson Road report all manner of odd sounds. Knocking at their windows and doors. Ghostly voices from the side of the road. Disembodied footsteps trudging through the grass. I visited that spot when I was a young man, my teacher told us. Then he raised his eyebrows and gave us all a spooky look. I don't recommend it. So, imagine it. You're back in middle school. It's still early morning in mid-October. The world outside is gray and cold. You thought you would be having boring lessons today, but instead your teacher is sitting on his desk, weaving eerie tales for an hour. Then, once you're all good and scared, he stops. His eyes slowly move from face to face, and he says, in a spooky way, "Now this next story I know very well. Because it happened to me. Come on, /X/." I defy you to put yourself in my seat and not believe every damn word he said. I was spellbound. That's the reason I still remember this story after all these years. For the sake of the story, I'll just call my teacher by his first name, Frank. Frank had always been bookish. Growing up, the other guys used to make fun of him all the time. By the time he's in high school, he's a bit of a loner. The butt of everyone's jokes. The worst part is the other guys always embarrass him around girls. One girl especially. A nerdy band kid like him. Large glasses, braces, a mess of curly hair. Her name is Sandy. They know each other from honors classes, but he's too shy to talk to her. My teacher kept a framed photo of this girl on his desk, by the way. The two ended up getting married later, but at the time he couldn't even get 2 words out in her presence. One day, at lunch, a bunch of guys grab Frank and dump him into one of the trash cans. The teachers don't do shit. The coaches just laugh. Frank almost falls over trying to get himself out. A few tables down he sees Sandy. Her big eyes watching him through her thick glasses. Frank instantly goes beet red. Rushes out of there and eats the rest of his lunch alone in the hallway. A few weeks later. Halloween's approaching. Some of the guys at lunch are scaring the girls with ghost stories. Frank is at a nearby table. The guys bring up Patterson Road. Start teasing Frank, saying he should go up there with them. The girls can keep you safe. Hardy har har. Frank's had enough. Don't tell me you actually believe in ghosts, he says. That stuff's for kids. Frank has never even so much as tried standing up for himself, so they're all a bit taken aback. Then they laugh, and cheer him on. If you're not scared, then come with us tonight. Frank agrees. What have I gotten myself into? JPEG. That evening, before sunset. They all show up at Patterson Road, 3 cars deep. Frank got a ride with some of the guys. They tell Frank that if he's not chicken he should walk down the road alone. Frank's eager to prove himself. He gets out of the car, head high, shoulders back. There's more cheering from the guys. He walks a short way, then there's an eruption of laughter behind him and the sound of spinning tires. Then he's standing there alone. All by myself. MP4. He mentally kicks himself. Of course, it was all a prank. Now he's got to walk all the way back home. Alone. And darkness is fast approaching. But truth be told, he doesn't really care about that. His pride is wounded. Tomorrow at school he'll have to hear all about how the guys played a great trick on him. They'll laugh. The girls will shoot pitiful looks. Sandy will find out. She'll think he's even more of a loser than she probably already does. Frank is angry. He walks for a while, brooding. Frank is muttering to himself and eventually he says out loud, "I'm so stupid." The silence seems to swallow up his words. Frank looks around. By this point it's already dark. There's a full moon out, but it doesn't help much. Frank doesn't believe in ghosts, but the night feels eerie. He begins to hurry down the road. That's when Frank hears it. Tap tap tap, to his left. Sounds like someone knocking on the trees. Tap tap tap, to his right. He looks over. Suddenly he hears the sound of footsteps behind him, like someone briskly walking from one side of the road to the other. He turns around but there's no one there. What the fuck? He figures some of the guys must have stayed behind to mess with his head. "You can't scare me," he shouts, and keeps moving. Then a rush of footsteps behind him again. Frank whips around expecting to see whoever it is. But the road is empty. Wow, they're fast. Frank begins to hurry down the road. The tapping continues as he walks. It seems to be following him down the road. "You may as well just come out," he shouts to the guys. No response. He realizes the tapping is following him, but he doesn't hear any footsteps in the grass. He's beginning to feel a bit unsettled. Eventually he's passing a large, solitary oak on the side of the road. Tap tap tap. He jumps. That was loud. It almost sounded like someone was taking an axe to the oak right there in front of him. It happens again. Tap tap tap. It's definitely coming from the oak. But he's staring right at it and there's no one there. Every few seconds it happens again. Frank is scrambling to think of an explanation when he hears the sound of someone running. This time it's on the road in front of him. Footsteps rushing from one side of the road to the other. They're everywhere, like multiple people running across the road. But there's not a soul out there. Frank is frozen. The tapping, the footsteps, he doesn't know what to do. He barely notices the approach of a car behind him, even as its headlights flood the road. The lights go out, the engine shuts off, and the footsteps stop completely. Frank turns around, it's Sandy. What's she doing out here? He rushes over to her and asks if he can have a ride home. Sandy can obviously tell he's a little freaked out. She tells him of course she'll give him a ride, and Frank practically dives into the car. "What's wrong?" she asks him. Frank looks at Sandy, but can't get the words out. What if she thinks he's crazy? The engine's off, so it's completely quiet, and the silence is awkward. Tap tap tap. They both hear it. It's coming from right outside the car. From the left. Then from the right. And then it's so close that they both jump. It's coming from the window. Then from the car door, and the windshield, and the roof, and the trunk. Tap tap tap, fucking everywhere. Frank says, "Let's get out of here," and Sandy cranks the ignition. As they're taking off, the car passes the giant oak and Frank hears it again. Tap tap tap, like someone's whacking the tree with a 2x4. Sandy floors it. They're hightailing it out of there, and pretty soon they're back on a main road. I never went to Patterson Road again. At least, not after dark. There was total silence in the room. I always thought you could cut the tension with a knife was just a saying, but you could literally feel the heaviness of it. Then the bell rang, and everyone jumped. Keck. Here's one about my experiences on the Ghost Bridge in rural Alabama. Be me sometime around 2007. Live about 1.5 hours away from a girl I used to mess around with, call her E. Decide to drive down and visit, maybe get some friendly benefits. She tells me her and a bunch of other people I've barely met are going to check out a local ghost bridge. /x/fag before I knew about /x/, so I'm 110% in for this. My first indication the night was going to suck happens the second I meet up at her friend's house, and E isn't there. No one knows what happened to her and can't get in touch with her, she just totally flaked out. Whatever, I've come this far. Time to go see spoopy shit. There's about 8 of us that pile up into the back of a truck and a shitty 4-banger and head out of town to the bridge. The lore is that slaves were hung off this bridge, and you can see shadow people walking down by the water's edge or feel a push of you sit on the edge and look down. Bridge is out on a dirt road. We pass over and the road ends in a clearing. Everyone stops and piles out. Our feet make sucking sounds as we walk to the bridge, because heavy rains have turned it clearing into a mud pit. We hang out on the bridge for a while trying to feel or see something, just shooting the shit. The bridge is small and wooden, but definitely high enough to hang someone off of. The spookiest thing was the trash under the bridge. Must have been a dumping ground in the 60s or 70s, because it's shallow enough to see and puke green washing machine, a bike, and other junk. Nothing happening, feels bad man. We all agree to go and start standing when one of the girls with us starts screaming and crying asking us if we can see her. What the fuck that? She claims she saw a girl running out of woods downstream toward the bridge, but no one else saw anything. She's sobbing and runs back to the truck ready to go. We all pile up again. Truck starts and then we hear it. The sound was our tires spinning. No forward motion. We are sunk. The driver phones a friend with a tow cable, but it'll be 2 hours before he gets off work. My face when I'm stuck next to a ghost bridge with a bunch of strangers and a hysterical chick. Start doing the next best thing and I'll get out, try to push the truck out of its rut. No dice. We need grass and wood to get some traction. I and two of the guys start picking around the tree line for good-sized branches to place under the wheels. We end up by the stream and everything is going well until I black out. This wasn't a blackout like I passed out. The moon was bright and I could see just fine, and then everything was black like I had gone blind. Out of the void, I suddenly see a 50-something-year-old black man staring at me, and I just feel pure hate. Not sure how long that lasted. It was probably a split second, but it felt like an eternity. My vision comes back and I look up. Suddenly realize I had wandered almost under the bridge. Fuck_nope.mp4. Uneasy feeling in my bones, like some bad shit is about to go down if we stay. Tell the guys we need to leave and get back to the truck, but they laugh at me and say they are almost done. Gotta go fast. I hop in the truck and tell them I'm done for the night. I'm good waiting until bro, because someone is going to get hurt if we fuck around by the bridge any longer. Barely get the words out of my mouth before we hear a scream and cursing down by the bank. One of the guys slipped into the stream and jammed his ankle. It's bleeding pretty badly and he can't walk on it. Oh fuck no. Hysterical chick had calmed down, but locked herself in the cab after hearing me predict an injury. We waited until bro after that, and I ended up driving 1.5 hours back home at 2 a.m. I don't know whether I should post this because the person with me will know. Only one other person in the world knows this story. Summer holiday in the North Pole region of Norway, wooded area. Going for a walk around 3 p.m. with my girl. After breakfast, slept in bed together and had a really lazy hour afterwards. We've been speaking about going for a walk the entire time. It's already 2 p.m. Every single time we get up something drags us back in. Decide to watch some videos together. 3 p.m. Isn't it time to go? We should eat something instead. Decide to order food in. 4:30 p.m. Getting uneasy feeling. My girl still wants to go, it's summer so the sun won't go down. Everything around me feels unreal. Start to get dressed. About to go. For some reason I decide I would surprise my girlfriend with a make-out session. She's feeling hot as well. We make out. It escalates. And escalates. It's already 7 p.m. Girl is exhausted and needs to rest a while. I'm feeling frustrated because I still want to go for that walk. Around this time I get a shiver up my spine. Start remembering things from a long time ago. I'm unable to sleep while she's dozing away. I walk around our apartment building with great unease. Need some company. Wake girlfriend up. She really doesn't want to wake up but eventually gives in. Tell her it's now or never, it's already 10 p.m. She starts to get dressed. I plan out the drive to camp. Now that I think about it, I've never camped and have no idea what I'm doing. In fact, I don't even know who came up with this idea. I certainly am not too fond of walking trips. Shake that off and go to car. Uneasy as hell. Streets empty, sun is up like it's the middle of day. Everyone is at home. We have the entire road to ourselves. Put on some random music. Girlfriend complains that it's sad music. I shuffle. It's still sad. I shuffle again. You guessed it, after about 7 times my girlfriend thinks I'm pranking her. No you dummy, give it a try. She does, sad music again. Turn the thing off. We reached the mountain bottom. It's beautiful, the most beautiful part of Norway I had ever seen. It's now around 10:40 p.m. and we begin driving up to the campsite. Something tells me to head back. Shake my head at myself, I'm always avoiding these walks, it might be memorable. Look at girlfriend. She's the most happy I've seen since we came here. Stop the car to appreciate surroundings. No one behind us and I don't give a damn. Scruff up her hair. She's a little pissed and starts to comb it. Laugh to myself, and when I stop the feeling returns. Now it's pure dread. I literally want to turn the car around, but again I know myself well and how I like to avoid these things. We park. Now at the campsite. Get out, make sure we have all of our thick clothing items on. Pass by campers, all of them are asleep. It's now 11 p.m. Start to walk into the woods. It's kind of creepy, but my girlfriend looks fascinated. I walk in ahead. Now the weirdest thing happened, something I can't explain to this day. My vision went entirely black for a moment. I didn't tell my girlfriend this, but she suddenly grabbed my hand and pulled me towards her with all her might. "I'm seeing something," she screamed. I am dazed but try to calm her down. She's shivering and starts to look at me like there is something between us which isn't there. I can't see anything. We haven't even walked the trail yet. She's on the verge of screaming, so I comply and run back to the car with her. She's panting and crying. Asks me to stop the car. She gives me a hug and continues to cry. I'm like, "What happened? Let me get you some food." She shakes her head. She says what she saw is still fixed in her vision. It wasn't something there, but she lived through us dying. We were attacked and killed by a huge black beast in the woods. Neither of us drink or do drugs, by the way. I calm her down, making up all kinds of excuses, get her some food as I promised. She wasn't calming down and she was looking around like a hurt animal. Just a few hours ago she was happy and excited. She is normally a carefree girl. Set her to bed with a movie, she's fast asleep. Sit there wondering what the fuck just happened. Is my girlfriend insane? Why did I black out? Like the sun disappeared. What did she see? Why the fuck did I want to go to the woods? I don't sleep that night. I had a flight to catch in the morning as well. Girlfriend with me at the airport. She's still the same as when she was panicked. I hug and kiss her and tell her that I don't believe she's crazy or anything like that, and I'm not upset at all. We get into the plane. Morning newspaper from the region is waiting at the entrance of the plane. Grab a copy. Flicking through the first page, I stop dead like I'm seeing a ghost right in front of my face. The hairs on my back are all raised. I can't speak, let alone move. Stare at the newspaper, dart eyes around looking for something else. I can't avoid it. Headline: Couple killed in bear attack, same location as our campsite. I still can't cope with the situation right now, but am interrupted by the hostess. Please put on your seat belt, we're about to take off. I say something unintelligible and very tongue-why. She looks at me weirdly and with Nordic disdain. I begin collecting myself. She did watch us die, didn't she? And yet we are alive? What happened during that blank time? I must show her. I can't get myself to. I decided to keep it to myself from throughout the flight. Weeks later I show my girlfriend. After the fear subsided, she feels vindication. Says that she must have had a micro sleep and imaged the scenario. We came up with a million theories. But I know that somewhere buried in my subconscious is the real event that happened, which she saw but I didn't. The timeline where we may have both died.